Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is Season 14, Episode 11. Today I'm speaking with writer and blogger Kristen, the chicken librarian, who can be found on a homestead teeming with life in East Tennessee. Here she teaches about traditional Southern Appalachian heritage skills with a modern twist. She keeps the spirit of her forebears alive using today's conveniences to make and do what they did. I'll take you now to my conversation with Kristen, the chicken librarian. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. Today I'm very enthusiastic to have on the program Kristen, the chicken librarian. She's a homesteading guru who's had a blog for over a decade, and she's a passionate photographer, trail runner, knitter, and pie maker. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I got to ask, your blog is very interesting and you have a lot of info out there for people, and I just love it. What initially sparked your interest in learning traditional Southern Appalachian heritage skills?
So my dad grew up on an 80-acre working, we say farm, but it was more like a homestead. They were completely self-sufficient, and he wanted nothing to do with that, even though we grew up on the last 10 acres of that homestead, and he wanted nothing to do with that. And then I wasn't aware that I really liked that kind of stuff until I had moved to Rogersville, Tennessee. And I kind of dived right into it. I wanted chickens, and I have a friend who took me over, we call it over the mountain, to get some chickens, and they were baby chicks, and I'd never touched one before. And the lady was like hatching out all these chicks, and I had done my research. I wanted barred rock chickens, and she was hatching them out. And she said, just go over there and grab you some. And I was like, I've never touched a chicken before, let alone a baby chick. I'm sure I did as a kid, like all kids are like handling, you go to the petting zoo or whatever.
Yeah.
But in my adult memory, I didn't ever remember touching a chicken, let alone a baby chick. And so it's kind of scary. You're like, oh, what are these things? They're like, running around, they're tiny. What do I do? So I went over and I picked one up, and I was like, okay, I can do this. So I picked out 10 chickens, and I took them back home, and I'd done all my research because as a librarian, I really, you're into research. So I had read books. I had, this was before, YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. And I mean, I guess YouTube was out there, but it was before the craze of watching videos. So I kind of taught myself, and then I took those back and I started brooding them. And then I lived on a dead end road, and I was surrounded by pasture fields, and the farmer who had the cows that were kind of surrounding my house said he would plow up a garden for me. And I was like, cool. So I know, really nice, right? So I staked it out, and I was like, this is the garden I'm going to do. And mind you, I've never had a garden before. I just kind of was like, I'm doing it. And he came over and he plowed it up, and he was like, this is a pretty big garden. And I was like, no, it's okay. And he said, it ended up being like a 1/4 acre garden that I started with.
Yeah.
So it's really big. So I went with it. I did it, and I loved it. And so from there, you have these chickens, and now you have a garden, and now you have to kind of figure out what you're going to do with all of that stuff. So kind of taught myself how to can, and I was vacuum sealing food and dehydrating food, and I just jumped right in, and I loved it. And then I kind of would hop the fence into the farmer's field and do some foraging for blackberries and whatever else, and it just kind of grew from there.
Now, you said that you grew up on a farm, right?
I did not. My dad did.
Okay. Your dad did. Okay, that's right.
My dad did.
But you mentioned homesteads. So what makes a homestead? What is that exactly?
So to me, homesteading is more small scale, self-sufficient kind of thing. And farming, although farmers tend to be self-sufficient, they tend to be more producing for others' consumption.
Right.
Homesteading, you're kind of producing primarily for your own consumption, and then kind of a side, like a byproduct of that would be, having a little farm stand and selling some stuff, eggs and leftover, produce and stuff like that. But for homesteading, I kind of feel like it's more self-sufficient consumption for yourself.
Now, before we get to the questions about the blog and everything, I just want to ask about your librarianship. How long have you been a librarian? Did you always want to be one? What kind of librarian are you? What do you do?
I did not always want to be a librarian. I wanted to be a nurse, and I was actually in nursing school. And
Wow,
yeah.
that's impressive.
My whole life, I wanted to be a nurse. And then I got to nursing school and I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this. So
It's tough. It's really tough.
it's really tough. And I mean, I'll be honest, I failed a class in nursing school, which, is not unheard of. I was taking a big load and I was going to 2 different schools to get it done. And I failed one of my most favorite classes, which was pathophysiology. And I just said, you know what? I'm good. I don't really want to do this anymore. I'd been doing it for a really long time. I worked as a CNA for years just to get experience. I'd worked in hospitals, all that good stuff. So I ended up moving to upstate New York and was in a really small town and decided to go volunteer at the library. And I loved it. And I loved the librarian there. And I said, what do I need to do this job, or to do like kind of what you're doing or whatever? And she's like, well, you got to get your master's degree. And I was a undergrad dropout. So I had to go back and finish my bachelor's degree. And I did that. And then I figured out how to get my master's degree. So I did that. And then I ended up being a library director for many, many, many years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I went straight into it. I was like, we're going big or we're going home. So
You're a glutton for punishment is what you're saying.
Oh, yes, very much so. So thankfully my type A personality kicked in and it was really, I was a library director in upstate New York and back here in Tennessee. And then I was a school librarian in upstate New York. Yeah.
You are a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, no, I'm totally like my most favorite job though, I was in an academic library as a part-time reference librarian. Oh, loved that.
But, yeah, I do that too. That's really fun.
Yeah. But I haven't been a librarian. I was a library director for 3 libraries in upstate New York for about 5 years. And then I left there and started my business full time. And then kind of COVID hit. And after that, I was doing the academic librarian at a community college. Sorry, my cat's attacking me.
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, so I was an academic librarian at a community college for about a year, and then COVID hit, and then I kind of ramped up my business full time, and then I went back into being a school librarian and decided I was just kind of done being a librarian. So I left New York and I came back to Tennessee, and I've been running my business since I've been here. So I'm not technically a librarian anymore.
Hey, you'll always be a librarian.
I'll always be a librarian. Yeah.
Now, how did you come to write your blog, Chicken Librarian? How did this come to you?
So there's no great story. I wish there was some amazing story behind this, but there's not.
But you've been doing it for a while too. Like this is not a new blog. This has been for a while.
It's not. So I had actually started one way back. So kind of the other part that led me to being a homesteader is that nobody's going to see me do the quotes around homesteader. What led me to that was back in this was 2008 or so, 2010, in that general time frame. There was a lot of this big resurgence on homesteading, and there were some really big names in homesteading. Chickens, what is it? Chickens in the Road, Chickens something in the Road. There was Cold Antler Farm, Small Measure, Small Things, all these. Alicia Paulson, she's not necessarily a homesteader, but she was in that crafty, making a living, selling her products and stuff, her cross stitch kits and things like that, and was kind of like a homemaker. And so I was like really enthralled by that. And that's kind of what started it. And so I came up with this blog, Chicken Librarian, way back then, and I just never did anything with it. So whenever I came to doing my business full time, I was like, well, I'd had this handle for a while, and it just kind of made sense to continue it. So I had chickens and I was a librarian. So that's basically where it came from.
Now you've had the blog for a while, and you by this time you've gotten quite a fan base. I look at you on social media. You have a lot of people following you, a lot of people following the blog. What has this been like from you? I'm sure you get feedback from your fans. So how have you felt about some of the feedback and learning that you're impacting lives with your work?
I am knocking on some wood. I have had amazing followers. Like, I know that there can be a lot of negativity out in the, internet world. I have been so grateful that even feedback that I get from people, if it has more of a not a positive tone to it, is because I don't really feel like it's negative. People give you feedback, and you take it for what it is, and you
Right.
evaluate it, and you say, yes, that's something that definitely I can improve on, or that's not really fitting where I'm going, or whatever. So or that's something I can't control, that's out of my control, kind of thing. So um it's not, so I don't really consider it to be negative, but the more slanted towards the negative feedback that I get has really just been a positive and impactful for me. um I love hearing from people. I don't think they believe me though, because I'm like, no, I really want to hear from you. um I love hearing from people. And whenever they give me the feedback that says, I just had a lady who was in a fermentation class, and she emailed me, and I kind of was in the midst of, moving, and a lot of different pieces were going on. And it fell to the wayside. And so I ended up apologizing and emailing her back, but she ended up commenting on a fermentation post saying, I didn't think that I was going to be able to do it, and I thought it went wrong, and it really ended up being really good. And thank you so much. And that makes me feel good, because I feel like I have empowered that person to do something that they wouldn't have done otherwise.
Now, in your blog, you talk about homesteading made easy. Can you give us some examples specifically of how you incorporate modern convenience into these traditional skills?
Yes. So the biggest example I can give is we make mozzarella cheese, which,
Oh,
you
nice.
know, yeah, if you've ever made mozzarella cheese, it's not time consuming. It's just that you have to follow the steps. You have to get the temperature here, use rennet, you do whatever the steps are. And then you put it into hot water, and you're supposed to then stretch it through, using that hot water. But the modern convenience for us is Ricky Carroll, who is the cheesemaking guru, has written a recipe for a 30-minute mozzarella, and you use the microwave to stretch it. So
No way.
yes. So you can literally, I teach a class. It takes us an hour to do it, because, we're not in our homes. We're not using our own equipment. We're on hot plates. We're, out and about sometimes we're at a brewery. Sometimes we're at a community center. But we use a microwave and we stretch it, and it takes us an hour to do it. But whenever you're at home, it literally takes you 30 minutes from start to finish. And so I feel like that's how you empower people to get their, like, less processed. You can use some local milk. And it doesn't take a lot of special equipment. So you can feel empowered to make this cheese in 30 minutes without using any special equipment. You need rennet and some milk, and citric acid really helps the process. You don't have to use citric acid. It just takes a little longer to make your
Mhm.
cheese. But so that's how I'm trying to help people figure out that in homesteading, to me, I should back up a little bit. Homesteading to me is any way that you're just getting your hands dirty. Like, you don't have to go full out homesteading to like self-sufficient, off the grid, to be a homesteader. To me, if you're making your mozzarella cheese from scratch, and whatever, you're buying some local milk to do it, you're a homesteader. You're getting your hands dirty. And I just like people to feel empowered to know that it's actually not that hard to get going and get started to do this stuff.
Beyond the practical aspects, like having food, what are some of the unexpected joys you found in living a homesteading lifestyle?
Oh, I love chickens. Oh, I love chickens. Sorry, let me.
Are you totally good?
Oh, stop. Going crazy. Maybe. Um, anyway, unexpected joys. There's a lot of joys in homesteading. I think there's just something so satisfying about just making something from scratch and just knowing that you made that thing, and that especially whenever you don't think that you can do something and then you do it and you have somebody encouraging you to do that. So the joys of homesteading. I love chickens. I love animals in general. Like, I haven't had the pleasure of keeping goats, which is one of my goals. But I just feel like that, you know, they're just a lot of fun. I used to go out and sit in the chicken coop with the chickens, and just after a hard day's work, you go to work, you're a library director, there's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with, and you come home and you go sit with those chickens and they jump up in your lap, or they're just like, just doing their thing and being chickens. And it's just so satisfying and so relaxing. Or just going out and getting my hands dirty. I said this before, I call it getting my hands dirty. So anytime that I can be out and I can just get my hands dirty, whether it's making a loaf of bread, or it's, planting a flower, or it's cutting flowers, or it's going and foraging for something like wildflowers. And then you see that bouquet. There's so many joys with it. There's a lot of hardships, which I'm sure we're going to talk about too.
Now, there's been a lot of, you must have had a learning curve since you initially got the chicks that you got. And then we talked about that a little bit until now. What has been like your biggest fun takeaways from raising chickens? What have you learned from raising chickens?
I think I've learned a lot. I mean, I feel like this is a very philosophical question.
Yeah.
I mean, they teach you how to slow down, don't they?
Oh,
You know,
yes.
they teach you how to just go and sit and enjoy some time, because as a full-time, I don't work full-time anymore. I mean, I work full-time on my business, but I was for years working full-time and doing my homesteading full-time, and not even trying to run a business, just trying to run my homestead. And so you get really busy, you get really caught up in life, you get really like overwhelmed, you get really stressed out, and then you go and you sit with these chickens for 10, 15, 20, an hour, whatever. And it teaches you how to slow down. It teaches you to just stop and enjoy this process and watch them. You learn a lot from you learn a lot about their behaviors and what's normal behaviors. And she's really going crazy. You learn a lot about, and then you can really troubleshoot your chickens, right? Because chickens are hard animals, because they won't show you that they're sick until they're really like on death's door. So the more that you actually interact with them and watch them, the more that you can actually learn about their behaviors. And yeah. So they just teach you how to slow down.
Yeah, it's funny. I raised chickens in high school for FFA because we didn't have enough, land to do cows and pigs and stuff. And I didn't
Yeah.
really want to do that. So I got mocked a lot because everybody else had cows and pigs and I raised chickens, but I liked raising the chickens. But the one thing that I learned philosophically from raising chickens is that they don't wait. There's no putting it off. You got to take
Right.
care of the chickens. So for me, I've always had this inner mantra, like I got to take care of the chickens, which is that you got to take care of the must do things first before you do anything else. So I
Mm,
always took care of the chickens in the morning and when the minute I got back from home from school, because you can't, you know what it's like. You can't just like leave it for tomorrow. You
right.
can't not feed them. You can't not clean up the chicken poop. You got to like take care of them, water them. They're work. They're like, you know, they're like, anything else living that you have. You got to take care of it. And I think it preps you some as a kid for like adulthood to some degree, but like as an adult, it's always teaching you got to take care of the most important basic things. That's the first thing you got to tackle. That was what I
Agreed.
took away from it. They're
That's
good teachers.
that is a really, really good point. That's that philosophical kind of, yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And like, it helps you slow down. It helps you yeah, to take into account, what your priorities and how to prioritize that too.
For many of us who live in the city or live in the suburbs, the idea of homesteading or having like preparing our own food and stuff is very intimidating, but you make it seem very engaging and easy, in your way. So what is some of the initial steps you'd recommend for somebody who's curious but terrified of this?
I would start small. I would choose what it is that you want to do. Not everybody needs to go full scale like I did in the very beginning and get 10 chickens and have a quarter-acre garden and teach yourself how to can. I think that, and I'm not just saying this because I teach classes, but I think there's something to be said about taking a class versus watching a video from somebody that you don't know. And I'm not discrediting anybody out there who A, watches videos, or B, produces videos. I just think that there's like kind of people who want to just watch a video, and I think that's fine. But I think there are people who really get more satisfaction out of being in a class and having that kind of one-on-one connection and learning from other people. So I would just choose what it is that you want to do. Do you want to start with a garden? Don't start big. Start with, maybe one raised bed. Start with some pots. Start with, some easy to grow vegetables, and herbs are always a great way to start. You know, Squashes, even though like nobody, like squash and it's prolific. It's a really great place to start.
Yeah.
Eggplant's kind of hard. Tomatoes are pretty easy. Peppers are, somewhere in between. But get a pot, get some dirt, put it in there, get going. If you want to start with bread, like don't dive into everything at once. Choose one area that you want to learn and go for that until you feel proficient with it, and then go somewhere else. I tend to be an all or nothing kind of girl, so I just dove right into everything. But I didn't actually. I dove into chickens and gardening, and everything kind of came from that. I just don't think that you need to start with a quarter-acre garden like I
Yeah.
did.
I mean, that's a lot, but God, what a way to learn, though. I bet that was probably exciting for you, and that probably taught you a lot to get that
Yeah,
quarter acre.
it taught me a lot. And then I didn't have a garden for a while. I just wasn't living in places where I could have a garden. And then
Yeah.
I finally ended up, um, through various stages of my gardening career, I had a whole garden in pots one time. And then I lived in a place where there was an old tennis court, and I turned that into a garden, but it was mostly raised beds. That had some limitations because it was a concrete uh, tennis court. If you go back on my blog, you can see pictures. I took an old hay wagon and I turned that into a raised bed.
Ooh,
And then,
nice.
yeah, it was really amazing. And then the last iteration of my garden that I had before moving to Tennessee was pretty much, it was probably a quarter acre again, but it was, I had like cranberries, which is really interesting
Oh,
because
wow.
people think that you need a bog for cranberries, but you
That's what
don't.
I thought, to be honest with
Mm-mm.
you.
You don't. The bogs are so they need water. They prefer more water, but they're just little vines and they grow. They're ground cover. And then they use the bogs. They flood them because that helps it helps with picking. So
Yeah.
basically they flood the bog, and then the cranberries float to the top, and then they come in and they skim them all off. And
Oh,
that's,
wow.
yeah. So you don't actually need, if you're growing them in that quantity, of course, a bog is obviously preferable. But if you just want something in your garden, you can just put cranberries in your garden. But anyway, I had like cranberries and strawberries and blueberries, and I had like a whole cut flower garden, and I had asparagus, and I had corn, and I had like a big, so it was divided up into different sections. And then like the hay wagon was my flower bed, part of my cut flower bed part, and I decorated it all. You can see it on my blog if you go back far enough. It was probably 2021 that I had that garden, and it was fenced in, and it was amazing garden. So, but I mean, that took me from 2008 was my first garden until 2021 to get to that point. And it wasn't, I didn't have a garden every year. So it wasn't like I was, it took me that whole time to get to that point. It's just that that's how long it took me to, in between gardens and stuff, to finally figure out where I wanted to go with my garden. So, and every space is different. And you'll figure it out. The more that you do, the more you'll figure out.
We've all had bad days where, things go wrong. Like, I think in life that happens. And like with farming, you could have, disease or blights with chickens. You could have a predator. Things go wrong sometimes. How do you stay motivated when things kind of end up?
Oh, I am a softie, so anytime anything happens to any of my animals, even my garden, anything that's growing, but especially the animals. Anytime something happens, I've lost animals. I've lost chickens to predators. I've had to, give away my flocks before, just because life changes and whatever
Yeah.
moves, whatever it is. Although I will say that whenever I had my first flock, I took it from Tennessee to New York with me in the
Oh,
back of my
wow.
car. Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. But whenever you have to, I had to dispatch my roosters, because whenever the person I was giving my flock to, they did not want the roosters, and roosters are hard to get rid of, to
Hmm.
give away. Although I had two roosters and they were amazing. They were amazing roosters, but I had to dispatch them. So
Yeah.
um, but that's hard. It's a really hard choice. And I just say to myself, I'm just going to do better. So you lose a chicken to a predator, and you say, okay, what did I learn from this? And how can I improve the safety of my flock? If you lose chickens to um, a disease, or an animal to disease, you say, what caused it, and how can I improve? How can I do better? Um, if something, vegetable wise, something doesn't turn out right, regardless
Yeah.
of what it is, you just kind of learn what made it do this. Or like if you're cooking and you're preserving something, or you're making something, like your jam doesn't set up to be
Hmm.
jam, so now it's syrup. You just try to,
Yeah.
like, how do you make it better, right? How do you improve upon it the next time, or turn it into something else?
Yeah, I've been there. I've given away a lot of fruit flavored syrups over the years.
Nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You just don't tell people it was supposed to be jam. You just say, yep, I made the syrup. I just didn't feel like
Exactly.
making jam. Yep, no big deal.
Besides Chicken Librarian, your blog, what are some of the other resources you recommend for people who want to learn more about traditional skills in homesteading?
Ooh, I would definitely. I don't have this on my website, but now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should do some sort of list for people, because the thing is that there's a lot of people out there. I said this before. I don't discredit anybody. People are out there, they're doing their thing. Nobody knows who I am. People, like, how do you know that I'm the expert, right? Until you get to know me, and you watch my videos, or you take
Right.
a class with me, or you read my blog or whatever. You don't know who I am until you do that. So I can't discredit anybody. But I am it's the librarian in me. I'm a big book person, and I think that there are experts in the field, that I learned from. So I mentioned, like, Ricky Carroll, she's the cheese making guru. Gail Damerow, who publishes with Story Publishing, she is the animal guru. You can I have her books for chickens and chicken health and goats, and just on and on. So I kind of just feel like you just find somebody who you really connect with, and you think that they really are the expert, if you're going to do like the online world. Or you go and you read books. And whenever I say you read books, I mean you need to read it from cover to cover. You make notes, you highlight, you really get into that, and then you start doing whatever that thing is.
So, the big question now, what's next for you?
Mm, lots of things. Lots and lots. I'm just getting started. I know I've had this business for a really long time. I've had to put it down because of life, a lot. And so I have really taken some time to evaluate my business and figure out who I am in that business, because really I am the brand. So I am getting ready to kind of revamp, and I want to do a lot more stuff online, and I want to travel. I would love to travel and do classes as I go. So we talked about this kind of before, but would love to write a book. I would love to be published. I think that that's kind of, you know, every librarian's ultimate dream is to be a published author.
Yeah.
I think we kind of, we all love, I think, writing and the written word and that kind of thing. And so it's always like kind of the goal to be published. So, but I will be doing a lot more things to get the word out to people in kind of more, like some PDFs and some videos and some in-person classes, and just really expanding outside of the homesteading realm too. I enjoy things like tablescaping, and I enjoy decorating and showing people how to do these things, some private events, that kind of thing. So expanding in that direction.
Well, Kristen, it's really been wonderful talking to you. I want to tell people that we have links to the Chicken Librarian in the bio, and I want to urge them to check that out. It's a wonderful blog. Kristen, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
That was all the time we have today on the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I want to thank Kristen, the Chicken Librarian, for being on the podcast with me and enduring the jackhammers that appeared outside of my window at the end of the interview. You can find links to her blog in the bio, and next week we'll be talking with two-time James Beard Award-winning author John DeVore. That's going to be on Monday. We're going to be talking about his new book, Theater Kids. We'll also be speaking with Nicholas Nugent next Friday about his book, The Spice Ports. You won't want to miss it. Until next week, I'll see you at the library.